Good morning, everyone attending this session. Today, myself, along with my third professional MBBS Part 2 student, Ms. Jyotsna and Balaji, we would like to present our session on Tales and Games, Transforming Medical Education Through Immersive Narrative Game-Based Learning. So disclosures, nothing to disclose, and conflict of interest. Both of us have nothing to declare. And the purpose of this session is to unlock the art of crafting, engaging narrative games by enlightening medical and health science educators with evidence-informed methods of designing narrative education games and igniting a dynamic learning environment that engages the students in active discovery and immersive learning. The learning objectives are, by the end of this session, the participants will be able to understand the aesthetic and pedagogical principles of narrative games, explore and analyze successful implementations of these education innovations, develop the ability to design and implement narrative games tailored to health professions education, and gain competence in evaluating the effectiveness of these innovative educational tools. I would like to start with the famous quote by Jane McGonigal: "Games are not merely our pastime, they are a powerful medium for learning, exploring, and growing." Coming to the game-based learning has created a paradigm shift in pedagogical approaches to medical and health science education. In such a rapidly transforming education landscape, fostering meaningful student engagement and effective learning experiences is, of course, a paramount. The education theories that are underlying behind the education game-based learning or the gamification in medical education is the social constructive theory, experiential learning theory, flow theory, situated learning theory, and the self-determination theory. The social constructive theory, which is proposed by Lev Vygotsky, states that the players work together and learn from each other by interacting, observing, and analyzing their shared understanding. Whereas the experiential learning theory, which is proposed by David Cobb, applies to the game-based learning through the fact that the games provide a virtual environment where learners can experiment, apply new knowledge, and of course, see the consequences of their actions without the real-world risks. That means it provides a very conducive environment and non-threatening environment for the learners to learn. The third theory is flow theory, which is proposed by Mihaly, which states that the games are particularly good at maintaining the flow state that is neither too difficult nor too easy and keeps the learners in optimal challenging state. The situated learning theory, which was proposed by the Lev and Wenger, applies to the game-based learning by highlighting that the games stimulate real-life communities and also the real-life practices, providing a context for the learners to engage in social and meaningful learning. And the last theory, which is underlying the game-based learning in medical education, is proposed by the Deci and Rian, which is the self-determination theory, which applies to game-based learning as educational games often empower players by giving them control over their own actions, challenging them to improve their skills and facilitating connections or the relatedness with other players, which can enhance the motivation and engagement. Coming to the pedagogical principle underlying the game-based learning is the individualization, feedback, active learning, motivation, creating the social environment, scaffolding, transfer, and assessment. Individualization. It's nothing but tailoring the learning experience to meet the individual needs, abilities, and interests of each and every student. Feedback, providing the timely, specific, and constructive information about the performance of a learner, which guides the future learning. Coming to the third principle, that is active learning, engaging the students in activities that require them to actively process and apply information rather than just receiving the information passively. Coming to the motivation, it's nothing but fostering a desire to learn in learners and engage them with the material. Coming to the creating the social environment, which is the next pedagogical principle, it promotes the interaction and collaboration among the learners to enhance the learning outcomes. Scaffolding, it is nothing but providing the support and guidance to learners as they develop new skills, gradually removing assistance as they become more proficient, that is moving from the novice stage to the proficient stage. Transfer, ensuring that the skills and knowledge acquired in one context can be applied to different and, of course, the real world situations. And the last important pedagogical principle is it's nothing but assessment. It's nothing but the measuring learning outcomes to gauge the effectiveness of the educational experience and identify the areas for improvement. Now, we'll move on from concept to the classroom. Evidence-informed impact of narrative card and board games implemented for medical students. So here we would like to share our own experiences with the narrative games that are implemented in our own medical school. So the narrative games, innovation 1, it is called as the Leojina, the Icteroscus. We have created this narrative game for jaundice as a narrative card and board game for the first professional medical students. I would like to play the narrative game video now.
Leojina, the Icteroscus. The magic white land, Leojina, consists of the stellian mainland and island of Asina, ruled by King Reuben and Queen Laverna, with newborn Prince Erlich as the only heir. Leojina is known for its crystals that are formed on the Scleros Hills in the island of Asina. Only the winged unicorn, Splendora, can cross the Bay of Biris and reach the island. These crystals are believed to bring good fortune to the kingdom. The royal family and residents of Leojina worship the sun god, Helios, to keep the crystals healthy. But with the evil intention of conquering Leojina, Witch Verdena, who lives in the castle of gods, has poisoned the king and queen with the Ictros potion and is also abducting the newborn Prince Erlich by casting a spell on the royal guards of the palace, Numerons. Leojina and the crystals are now under the Ictros curse. The crystals are losing their power and turning yellow. In addition, Galvanos, the evil monsters created by Witch Verdena, are causing havoc in the kingdom by killing innocent citizens and destroying their livelihood. To save the royal family and the crystals, sun god Helios sends angel Albuna, who reveals that the antidote to Ictros poison is the hepatopedia drug found inside the Yachna caves in the island of Asina. She needs your help in her mission to save the royal family and the crystals before they lose their powers completely. Your mission is to find Splendora, who can take you to the island of Asina, win over the Galvanos, rescue Prince Erlich, find the antidote to Hepatopedia, destroy Witch Verdena, and save the king and queen. But beware of the witch's evil spell, which will hinder your progress in this mission. Don't worry, it's not all bad. You will meet Fauchita, the magic pearl, 3 times during the mission. He will help you with the challenges that you face in this rescue mission and to save the crystals. Good luck! Leojina. Leojina, the Icteroscus.
Yeah, this is the narrative that we have created. So once we wanted the first professional medical students to facilitate the learning about the jaundice. So we have created the Leojina narrative game video that will be given to the students. And once it is done, the students are able to see that. And then they have had the missions that are set up in the game. And then they'll be move on to the card and board game. So this is how the cardboard game that looks like for the Leojina, and they will start from here and then from the start and then move on, and they will have the cards which with all the tasks that are mentioned in the cards with different cards like red color, magenta, yellow color, and then they pick up from the slot and then they start playing it and then they'll move on, and they have the different missions and then they have to cross. You can see all the symbols here like Angel Albumina, Splendora, and then Galbinos, and all these things they will be having the tasks. So it is mandatory for them to complete the task over here and then move on the card and board game and finally accomplish all the tasks and finally reach the King Reuben. And this was published in the MEDET portal, the innovation journal for the education by the American Association of the medical colleges. And the narrative games, coming to the narrative games, the innovation 2 is, which is called as, we named it as Equilibria, the battle to balance. So this particular game has been created for the first professional MBBS students to facilitate the learning about the acid-base regulations and the disorders of the acid-base regulations. And the same way we have created the a story and a narrative for the acid base, which is related to the acid base balance, which is called as Equilibria. And then like Leojina, once they look at the narrative video game, and then they will come back to the actual game, which is the card and board game. Then it is published in the Advances in Physiology Education. I think all the participants can be able to access all the complete information, including the video, the assessments that we have used, the questions that we have used in all the questions, and the board. Everything is in the open access, and we have provided in the as a shared link. Then we have our third innovation in the narrative games which is called as Pancreata, the keto struggle. So this is the game, the narrative game that has been created to facilitate the learning of first professional MBBS students for their learning of diabetic ketoacidosis. And again, you have the narrative game, and then they will, once they see that, they will be set up the missions, and then they will start the actual game. So you have to start from here, and then you have so many missions that to accomplish, and they will be playing in the small groups. And all the 150 medical students, we have divided into 25 groups consisting of 6. So they will be playing in the 25 teams, inclusive of 6 medical students in each group. And this was under review in biochemistry and molecular biology education. Now over to you, Jyotsna, with related to the effects and impacts.
I would like to continue from here with what my professor, Dr. Krishna Mohan, has explained so far. First, I would like to start with the problems encountered in the traditional lecture-based learning. Next slide, please. So, from the student's perspective, I would like to share that lecture-based learning often leads to difficulty in remembering the concepts. It has less engagement, it leads to less engagement with the learning material, and often the content is very huge to study. This leads to lack of interest and difficulty in relating the concepts and applying it to the real-life scenarios. Also, there is more emphasis on the exam-based preparation, this leading to less student engagement. Also, the difficulty in assessing our own strengths and weaknesses. In traditional exam-based learning, we are unable to assess our own strengths and weakness. And this, again, it is further exaggerated by exhaustive learning in huge textbooks. And also, the process is very time-consuming when you learn it in a normal lecture-based manner. Next slide, please. So I would like to emphasize why did students find this narrative games to be more effective. First of all, it is a new approach to learning. We find narrative games making learning fresh and exciting, breaking away from the traditional methods. And next is it rekindles the enthusiasm to learn. The games always provide an enthusiasm, and it provokes our interest and makes us eager to delve into the material. And next is that it draws the attention of learners and it makes us engage more with the content. The interactive stories keep us focused, and it leads us to invest in what we are learning. And it is also a low stakes learning. We can explore and make mistakes without worrying about our grades, which help us to learn better. And obviously, it is a team based learning method, working with our classmates in small groups during the game. It makes it makes the learning process more collaborative and fun filled. Also, there is more interaction in the game. We get to interact more with each other, making the learning process more dynamic. Next slide, please. So also these narrative games serve as a self-assessment tool. We can check how well we are doing and understand where do we need to study more and improve instantly. It is also an instant feedback tool. Getting immediate feedback helps us to correct our mistakes and grasp the concepts more quickly. And next is longer retention. We remember what we have learned longer because of the immersive experience that we have had. And the enhanced application skills, the games were loaded with clinical case scenarios so that we can apply what we have learned in real world settings even after the game. And next, obviously, the enjoyment in the learning. Learning through narrative games is enjoyable, which makes the material easier for us to digest. And next, obviously, it is visually appealing. The vibrant visuals make our learning experience more engaging and easier to follow. All these components have made this learning experience with the narrative games very impactful and meaningful, leading to more student engagement and more intrinsic motivation as an adult learner. Over to my professor.
Yeah, now we'll move on to the challenges. So the first thing itself is the conceptualizing the tale, then designing for the interactivity, then of course the costs involved in printing the materials, because you need to conduct all these narrative games in 25 groups. So you need to all the 25 sets, including the cards, then the activities and all, allotment in time in the curriculum. That is another important thing, because now we have the very structured curriculum that is implemented across all the 706 medical colleges across in India, as mandated by our National Medical Commission. And of course, all the 25 teams should be supervised by, or should be facilitated by one particular facilitator. So you need to train the faculty as well. That is another challenge that we have faced. How to effectively implement the narrative games in the medical education. So let's create a checklist. So define the educational goals, then design gameplay mechanics, create visuals or multimedia, assessment of learning outcomes, and finally, the evaluation of the narrative game. So define the educational goal. You have to identify the subject matter and topics the game will address. And based on that, we have to define the specific learning objectives according to the SMART criteria, that is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, the next step is develop the narrative. So create a central theme that ties the tale to the learning goals. For example, we have created a central theme for the Leojina, then thereby Equilibria and Pancreata, then outline a plot for the story, which should be engaging the learners, then develop unique names for places and key characters according to the educational content, set up the conflicts and resolutions that challenges the game gradually. That we have shown you one example of the narrative game that we have created, that is Leojina. Then ensure the narrative has continuity from beginning to the end, so that the learners will be engaged and then motivated to achieve those outcomes. Then the third step is design gameplay mechanics. Select the mechanics that effectively convey the story and educational content, like card and board style, or the escape rooms, or the Monopoly style, etc. Then design the questions, challenges, and puzzles that align with the learning objectives. Draft the rules and regulations for the game, then prepare all game materials that are required, including whatever you have to have, the cards or the games or the activities or whatever it is, or to have the case based questions and all those things. Then create visuals and or multimedia, which is a most important thing in the game-based learning or the gamification in the medical education. So create, own, or use images with Creative Commons license. Otherwise, we'll get into the issues of the copyright. Then beware of the issues of the copyright. If pictures are copyrighted, use only after obtaining the license. Create a video-based narration of the story for immersive experience by the learners, and add visual effects and music for the enhancing quality. Assessment of learning outcomes, we have used both the formative approach as well as the summative approach. Assessment methods are that can be used in the game-based learning are in-game assessment, pre and post test, end of game assessment, comparative analysis of end of block or the internal assessment scores. For example, in-game assessment, you can see the card and board game itself. There, the assessments are integrated into the card and games in the form of the various missions. And of course, we have used the pre and post test score before the starting of the narrative game and after the completion of the narrative game in terms of attainment of the outcomes in the form of the pre and post test. And of course, we have an end of game assessment. Every game had an assessment with the case-based learning scenarios. And we also compared with a control group of the internal assessment scores who have had this narrative games and who did not have. Then coming to the evaluation of the narrative games, you can use for the evaluation of the narrative games, you can use the various surveys and also the questionnaires. So you can conduct surveys to gather objective feedback on the game's enjoyability, usability, of course, the confidence, pre and post confidence, and the education value. So also, it is better to include open-ended questions to obtain detailed insights into the player's experience. And also, we can also do conduct the focus group discussions and also in-depth interviews one-to-one. You can organize the focus groups or individual interviews to delve deeper into the qualitative aspects of the game experience and discuss the narrative impact, relatability, and also the perceived educational value by the learners. So I want to conclude this session by having this quote: teaching is not just about the imparting knowledge, it is about igniting a passion that inspires a lifelong learning and discovery. Thank you for your patient listening from myself as well as my third professional MBBS students, Ms. Jyotsna. Thank you very much. Yeah. Did you experience any resistance? Thanks for your questions. Did you experience any resistance to the narrative game? Were there any learners who wanted to have a traditional learning format? No, definitely. We never had experience. We have implemented for 4 batches of the first professional MBBS students, and we never had this particular experience. And no learner has opted traditional learning format than the narrative games. I think Jyotsna can add more focus on this question.
Sure, sir. I think the narrative games part itself is very engaging and new for the learner. We have been exposed to consistent learning environment with the same lecture-based teaching and traditional theoretical exams. So as student, we feel that the narrative games are more immersive and they offer a very new environment to learn, which is why students opt for that, and they prefer games to the lectures, traditional lectures.
And another question, let's assume you need to teach 10 things. You don't have the resources, time to create a game for each. So how do you decide which topic is the most appropriate or best suited to create a game? So yeah, we had this in our brainstorming sessions, and that's why we have, because we can't create for all, we can't create the narrative games because it's a time intensive, and we have to schedule into the timetables, and also already existing timetables, which we have to make sure that this will correctly fit. So what we have finally decided was we have the early clinical exposure in our competency-based medical education curriculum that is mandated by the NMC. So in that, for example, you take Leojina, which is the jaundice card board based narrative game. So we have picked up this particular topic because this comes under the early clinical exposure. So they learn in their biochemistry classes about the heme metabolism, and now they have to apply that particular knowledge and skills for their into the clinical settings. So that is why we have chosen. So we have decided to create the narrative games for those type of things, so that by the end of their graduation, they will be able to practice. When they start practicing, they will be able to see all these particular clinical conditions like acid-base disorders, then diabetic ketoacidosis, and jaundice. So that's how we have zeroed it on to create the narrative games, not for each and every topic, because as you rightly said, it's not possible for us to create for everything, the 10 things that we want to teach, and 10 things we can't create the narrative games. And how was the retention measured in the students? What we have done was initially we started with the pre and post test score. And also there is a formative assessment, that inbuilt formative assessment within the narrative card and board game. And then third, by the end of the narrative game, you will be having all the clinical case scenarios, then that assessment will be there. And not only that, we wanted to test the retention. So we also checked it with their internal assessment scores also. So that's why we have mentioned about the formative as well as the summative for this particular game. So the last question, what specific learning outcomes have you observed in medical students who participated in these narrative card and board games activities compared to the traditional teaching methods? So the specific learning outcomes that we have measured was, we have observed when compared to the traditional teaching methods was, they will be able to apply in terms of the context, and it is promoted in the contextual learning, whatever the topics that they have learned. For example, in the heme metabolism, they will be able to apply those in the context of the jaundice, because that is what is actually is required. So they will be able to apply the knowledge and skills that they have gained in their in learning the heme metabolism into the jaundice, and the same way the glucose metabolism into the diabetic ketoacidosis. So because that is what is important, because once they get graduated, they will be able to actually recollect and actually reinforce all these things when they see the patient of the diabetic ketoacidosis, and correctly diagnose them as well as treat them correctly. So that is what is the specific learning outcome that we have observed when compared to the narrative games and the traditional learning methods.